Today we're going to talk about what are known as the Muslim gunpowder empires, but I'm also going to discuss the rise and expansion of an independent Russia. So when we refer to the Muslim gunpowder empires, all right, in reality, guys, all of the states that we're talking about in this early modern era, if you are a state that is rising and expanding, you have harnessed the power of gunpowder, all right? We talked about gunpowder originating in China in the early second millennium, and then because of the Mongols, gunpowder technology making its way to the west. So it's going to make its way into the Islamic world. It's going to make its way into Western Europe. And the societies, the states, the civilizations that embrace this technology to make stronger militaries are going to see expansion. Collectively, the gunpowder empires, if you just hear someone mentioning them, you are going to think of three of them in the Islamic world, and they are the Ottoman Empire, the Safavid Empire, Ottoman Empire, the Safavid Empire, S-A-F-A-V-I-D, and the Mughal Empire of India, M-U-G-H-A-L. These are the Muslim gunpowder empires. They're going to all kind of exist concurrently, 15, 16, 1700s. They're going to all see their height. And they all rise to power and expand because they have harnessed cannon technology and gunpowder technology. The Ottoman Empire is probably the most important in terms of world history. And largely because they last the longest. All right? The Ottoman Empire will be born in what is known as the Anatolian Peninsula. Now, this map is really hard to look at and figure out what's going on here. But this is Anatolia, you can see, in 1300. This body of water would be? This is the big Mediterranean Sea. The Aegean Sea is up in here. It's the smaller body. So this is the Mediterranean Sea. Up here, what body of water would that be? That's the real Black Sea, okay, not to be confused with the Baltic Sea, sometimes known as the Black Sea in AP World, or at least in this class. So there's the Black Sea. Here is the Mediterranean Sea. This peninsula that is bound by the Mediterranean Sea and the Black Sea and the Aegean Sea is called the Anatolian Peninsula. It's also sometimes referred to as Asia Minor, all right? As if this is all Asia Major, this little bit is Asia Minor. Anatolia. Today, it's the present day. It makes up most of the present day country of Turkey. Very good.
A European country or an Asian?
Very good question. Location. The vast majority of the country of Turkey today, the vast majority of the Ottoman Empire in its heyday, was in Asia. All right, so all of this is Asia. But as you hop across these straits, this is Europe. So the city of Constantinople, for example, which eventually we're going to talk about in a moment, is going to become the capital of the Ottoman Empire and renamed the city of Istanbul by Muslim Ottomans. The city of Istanbul was actually on the European side. So it is a territory that spans two continents. Yes?
And if you look at their demographics today, they're pretty much a mix of the European and Asian, so you can't really say whether they're one or the other.
Yeah, and what does it really matter, right? I think that question only matters to, middle school or high school geography classes. It doesn't, it doesn't, because to say someone is Asian doesn't really tell us about that person very much, okay? For example, if you were to, tell any random on the street about somebody who is Asian, they will have a picture in their mind, and it will look nothing like people that live in Anatolia. They will be thinking of Asians that live in East Asia. They will probably be thinking Chinese or Japanese people. They will have no immediate concept that people from India are also Asian, or people from, the vast majority of the Russian state are also Asian, or obviously people from the Middle East are Asian. So to say someone is Asian doesn't give us very much information at all. So I would say it doesn't really matter. Yeah?
I asked something that was just if you hear a woman, you automatically think of example, a white woman, you don't think of an Asian or a black woman, but if you hear an Asian woman, then you automatically think of Spanish. That's like if you go out to people on the street.
Interesting. I don't know this, obviously someone did some kind of experiment. Do non-white people even think of white women when they're told to think of a woman?
Non-white people think of, like, for example, like if I was, like, think of, like, when I think of a woman, I think of a white woman.
Really? Interesting. Okay, so we press on. And that's why, guys, your AP exam is not ever going to talk about, like, when it gives you a region to deal with, they're never going to say Asia. They're not going to say Asia. They'll say South Asia. That's India. They'll say East Asia. That is China and Japan and Korea. They might say Southeast Asia. That's like Vietnam. They might say Southwest Asia. That's the Middle East. All right. So you will not hear just Asia being mentioned. So let's talk about the Ottoman Empire. Do we notice this mess of Anatolia in 1300? It is well, if we push to the east, yes, ma'am. I don't know, places that no one cares about, or the map just didn't want to color in, or whatever. I don't know. Just no one entity is controlling those regions. So anyway, there's a lot going on here. If we go to the east, this is 1300. So this is like Pax Mongolica. This is the height of the Mongol Empire. So we've got there, like as far as the Mongol Ilkhanate is going to push to the west here, but if we obviously go all the way to China, we're going to see in 1300 China ruled by the Mongol Yuan dynasty, right? So you've got the Mongols taking care of business further to the east. And then Anatolia is left in kind of disarray. There's no one centralized state. Further to the west, we've got the Byzantine Empire. Now, the Byzantine Empire, give me a minute. The Byzantine Empire has been around for a long time. In fact, some historians would even say that the Byzantine Empire is really what? It's really the Roman Empire. It's just a continuation of a Roman Empire, that Eastern Roman Empire. But we can see by this point, the Byzantine Empire is very small. All right, if we were to go back centuries before, we would at one point see the Byzantine Empire stretch all the way through the Anatolian Peninsula, all the way into the Middle East, all the way into North Africa. But they begin to lose all of these territories in North Africa and in the Middle East when? The rise of the Islamic caliphates. First the Umayyad Caliphate, then the Abbasid Caliphates. So their expanse is going to come at the expense of the Byzantine Empire. By 1300, the Byzantine Empire is relatively weak, certainly compared to what it was in the centuries before. This Anatolian Peninsula is a massive divisions, okay? But within the heart of it, you see this one little nugget of land controlled by a guy named Osman. Osman is going to give his name to what later becomes the Ottoman Empire. So beginning in the early 1300s, a group of Turks, these are Turkish people, a group of Turks.
In mid-1300s?
Yeah, early 1300s. In the early 1300s, a group of Turks, following the leadership of a man named Osman, will begin to expand their holdings in the Anatolian Peninsula. By the late 1300s, they've taken control of much of Anatolia. But where we really start to notice them in the story of AP World History is coming with this man, a Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, who by named Mehmet II, or Mehmet the Conqueror, a Sultan of the Ottoman Empire who in 1453 will, with his armies, bring down the walls of Constantinople and conquer that city, bringing an end to the Byzantine Empire. So if we want to talk about the Byzantine Empire being a continuation of the Roman Empire, now that Roman Empire is done by 1453. And so the Ottomans conquer, they sack Constantinople, they take that city, they make that city their own, renaming it Istanbul. And now the former capital city of the Byzantine Empire is now the new capital city of the Ottoman Empire.
What happens to the Byzantine
The Byzantine Empire really ceases to exist, and most of the lands that were left of the Byzantine Empire will be gobbled up by states surrounding, most of which being taken by the Ottomans. Yes? Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, you know what? I am no expert in the 1300s Anatolia, but I'm going to make an assumption here, and you guys are allowed to make such assumptions because you're smart people. We've got sound leadership. We've got a leader who's able to organize armies. All of these states, when they grow, they've got good military leadership at the expense of their neighbors who might have lesser military leadership. So I am no expert, and I won't pretend at all to be, but I'm going to peg it to, you've got pretty good leaders, and you've got followers who are well organized, and they expand through that matter. But how do they sack Constantinople? Because they've got their hands on cannons. All right, and they ultimately will bring down those walls of the city of Constantinople. The city of Constantinople was one of the most important cities in the world, obviously. This is that church built originally by Byzantine Emperor Justinian. We should have that name in our memory banks, right? Built originally by, or not built by Justinian. Justinian didn't lift a brick, but commissioned during Justinian's reign. This is the Hagia Sophia, or Hagia Sophia, Hagia Sophia, Sofia. This was the biggest Christian church in the world. Now it becomes a Muslim mosque after the Ottomans conquered it. This is when it happens, in 1453. And notice these distinctive structures surrounding the now mosque. These are minarets. These are not constructed by Justinian's reign. These are minarets, which would be, kind of ever-present around mosques through historical architecture. These are the towers of which a guy would climb up, and he would make a call. He's called a muezzin, and he would make a call to prayer. Now, in modern days, these are not usually done by guys. These are done by just loudspeakers and the call to prayer to let the people of the community know when it's one of their 5 times a day that they are needing to pray. So whenever you see a structure, if your exam gives you a picture and you've got these towers located around it, you are going to be assuming that is a mosque that we're dealing with. Yes? I want to hear a very short story.
So we used to live in an apartment when I used to live in Jordan, and for the longest time we didn't really have a lot of mosques. We didn't really
Okay.
we didn't hear that.
Yeah.
We had to drive a little bit up. But then I remember 2 years before the last 2010, what's it called? They built a mosque.
Okay.
And so my mom would wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go, huh? And then it got to the point where they repeated a lot. So my brother used to recite it, or I recited it. My mom would be like, we're not Muslims.
Right, and this has been an area of controversy in communities with large Muslim populations moving in and kind of challenging traditional cultural norms in the society. You see this discussed a lot in European cities, but even in our own backyard, in Hamtramck, Michigan, there was a debate over the last few years about community mosques projecting the Muslim call to prayer and whether this is acceptable or should be done. And you've got people in the community that don't want to hear it or that feel that it's going to change people's thinkings, even though they may not even know what words are being said. And this does pop up in the news every once in a while as being a debated issue. Many liken it just to a community that has a church and that on every hour plays the church bells. But it's certainly out there for debate. Hannah.
So the Turks were Muslims.
The Turks were Muslim. Yes. These.
Were they Muslim because of all of the military conquest that the Islamic
Yeah. They were born in an area that had already been conquered by Islamic empires. Yeah. No, I got Kaylee, and then you out.
So I was just wondering.
Shh. Guys, please.
You have to think Muslims and everything, but if they were to say think of Dar al-Islam during this period, is Dar al-Islam, does that just refer to period 3, or does
No, like there's a Dar al-Islam today. The House of Islam is like kind of defined as all of the territories of the world that are within the Islamic sphere, within Islamic control. So it wasn't. That's the first time we ever heard of it, because that's when Islam was born. But now, basically, before 1453, Constantinople was not a part of that. Now they are a part of Dar al-Islam. Excellent.
Does Dar al-Islam refer to like the territory that's mainly Muslim, or the people that are Muslim?
It refers to the territory. Like it's the good question. So Dar al-Islam is the House of Islam. So like your home is where your family lives. Is anybody? We might have caught it in this class. The name for the community of believers, the people. Ummah, very good. So your family or the people, the house is where you live. In Islam, the Ummah is the community of believers. Dar al-Islam is the expanse of territory where they are. Yes?
If the Hagia Sophia is turned into a mosque, then I thought all mosques are supposed to face.
Very good. Good call. And you know what? I think you can kind of make it out here a little bit. Yes. So a mosque in its construction is to orchestrate the prayers of the people towards the city of Mecca. But obviously the church, when it was constructed, had no such rules of anything. And I think we can kind of make it out here. See, notice how this picture is like perfectly centered and symmetrical as we look down this massive domed building, right? But you can see all the way back here, this structure in the back is slightly off kilter, right? And it's so you can't move the building. You can't move the building, but you can slightly redirect the way in which the people will pray when they're inside the building. So the people that are going to be praying inside this new mosque are just slightly tilted. Which for, like, if you were an obsessive compulsive 16th century Muslim, it might mess you up. Like, the building is like so perfect and symmetrical and we are all turning slightly and it's messing me up. But I don't think that was that big of an issue. Today, it is not a working mosque. It's more of a historical artifact. It's a tourist destination today. So you can go there. But you can see, and actually, like when this stuff was put in by the Ottomans, a lot of the mosaics and like the Christian artwork was just covered up. But in the last century, much of that has been unearthed and shown again, not to like re-emphasize Christianity, but as like a historical artifact. But this is the kind of thing that's got, individuals today worried about a group like ISIS that is actively trying to destroy. Remember, we talked a lot about like the golden age of the flowering of Islamic learning and at the high point of the Abbasid Caliphate in the late first millennium, and how the Abbasids were, and the scholars within the Abbasids and the intellectuals were very big on holding on to different ideas and learning from the cultural experiences of many groups, and they embraced a lot of that. Well, this current, like ISIS right now, or the Taliban before it, these radical views that there's only like one interpretation of a faith, and everything else is sacrilegious. ISIS is actively trying to destroy a lot of these artifacts and these churches that they come across, and many of them are 2,000 years old, and so there's obviously some concern that as that group might spread its influence, that some tremendous artifacts are being lost. And certainly we would never want that to happen to this place. Yes, and then we're going to press on. Go.
So, you made me lose my stuff, okay?
Okay, so we're going to press on even sooner. Within a century of the Ottoman control of, we'll talk about him in a second. Within a century of Ottoman control of now Istanbul, the Ottoman Empire will begin to reach its high point. And this map, based on its different colors, we can see the early Ottoman Empire by around 1451. You can see 1451, and you might not be able to make out this color from where you're sitting. But in 1451, that's 2 years before 1453, they don't yet have Constantinople yet. Constantinople is a walled city. It's hard to get into. But they've surrounded it. By 1453, They've got it all. And then by our next color takes us further out. By 1521, they're pressing even further. And by 1586, they're pressing certainly into Europe. So the Ottoman Empire is going to experience tremendous growth very quickly, okay? And we talk about the high point of the Ottoman Empire taking place during the 1500s under the rule of a man named Suleiman the Magnificent. And here he is. Suleiman the Magnificent. S-U-L-E-I-M-A-N. Suleiman the Magnificent. S-U-L-E-I-M-A-N. Suleiman the Magnificent. He would rule the Ottoman Empire from 1520 to 1566. And under his rule, the Ottomans are going to press as far as they ever will, all the way to the gates of Vienna, Austria. And there's some fun historical games that you guys can play to think about, well, what would have happened had the Ottoman Empire conquered Vienna, Austria? You know, we were talking about...
Mozart would be like Muslim probably.
Or, yeah, might be composing, still be a composer, but might be composing music for a completely different ruling house, right? So they pushed all the way into Europe, through Hungary, into Austria. Now, please notice, this is for our future studies, right? Please notice that this chunk of Europe, we call southeastern Europe, all right, or the Balkan Peninsula down here. This chunk of Europe is going to be controlled and occupied for centuries by the Ottoman Empire, which means there's going to be many people in this area who were formerly Christians who will convert to Islam, all right? And this is just going to bring a new nature to the Islamic faith. And again, when you ask a random on the street, hey, picture a Muslim person, if you will. Well, they're probably going to picture a person of Middle Eastern descent. They probably wouldn't picture a person from Indonesia. They probably wouldn't picture a person from southern Russia. They probably wouldn't picture a person who's going to look as white as me from southeastern Europe, all right? But Islam is not a race. Islam is not connected to any particular race. Islam is open for anybody in the world. So we've got to understand that. This is going to become a big part of the story of our world history class towards the end of the year. All right, and a part of my story when you're seniors and we do IB history. Alex.
So this is their large look. What are the color codes?
The greatest extent. So beginning, later, and under Suleiman the Magnificent and after him. So look what the Ottoman Empire eventually does. They completely surround they almost surround the Black Sea. They're completely going to surround the Eastern Mediterranean. The Ottoman Empire basically becomes what the Byzantine Empire once was. All right? And the Ottoman Empire becomes the most important Islamic state. In fact, the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, and now we will go to this guy, the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, you guys are familiar with these characters, the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire is very early on in the Ottomans' growth going to consider themselves essentially the new caliph. So like if there was the Umayyad Caliphate and then the Abbasid Caliphate that considered themselves like the leaders of Islam on the planet, that's going to now become the Ottoman Sultan. I'm not going to call him a caliph, I'm going to call him a sultan. So Mehmet II was a sultan, Suleiman the Magnificent was a sultan. But they're essentially going to see themselves as that political and spiritual ruler of the Islamic faith. Cool? Now, Jafar here, if you guys remember, do you remember what Jafar's title was in the movie? He was the royal vizier, if you guys recall, right? A vizier, V-I-Z-I-E-R. A vizier in the Ottoman Empire was like the chief bureaucrat, the chief administrator. While the Sultan actually holds all political and religious authority, it's the vizier who carries out the day-to-day governing of the empire. Okay? Yeah, the movie makes all kinds of sense, right?
No, it's just the word. I was like, what's a vizier? And I was like, oh, it's a vizier.
Oh, yeah. So, yes, exactly. Yeah, and you see viziers or wazirs in other Islamic states as well. So anyway, in the Ottoman Empire, it's a vizier. Okay? Cool? The Ottoman Empire will achieve its height under Suleiman the Magnificent and under later rulers. But by 1571, and we've already mentioned this, an Ottoman fleet is going to be defeated on the Mediterranean Sea at a battle called the Battle of Lepanto. And they're defeated by Catholic navies, primarily Spain, but also some Italian ships in there as well. At the Battle of Lepanto, an Ottoman fleet is defeated. And this is going to stop the ability of the Ottoman Empire to expand deeper into the Mediterranean Sea. So they never are going to push, for example, beyond Italy. And around the same time, if you guys call the Battle of Lepanto, around the same time, 1571 is this battle. But if we recall, and we can always remember 1492 as a year that Europeans are starting to venture out. Now, 1492 is not really the start of it. That's the start of Spain going west. Before 1492, we've got the Portuguese going south. But the reason for Spain to go west and the reason for Portugal to go south was to avoid going through Ottoman lands in the Middle East, right? And so if we have this combination, if we now have this combination of the Ottoman Navy actually being defeated in the Mediterranean Sea, but now European explorers and travelers and merchants avoiding the Ottoman Empire, not taking their toll dollars through the Ottoman Empire anymore, but trying to circumvent it by circumnavigating it. They're going to avoid having to travel through the Ottoman lands. The Ottoman Empire is going to start over time bringing in less and less and less money to their central government's coffers. And the Ottoman Empire will begin over, and it's going to take a long time, many centuries ultimately, a slow period of decline. After this high point in the 1500s under Suleiman, eventually a slow decline. As Western European powers grow in power, we're going to talk in a few minutes about Russia. As Russia grows in prominence, the Ottoman Empire is going to experience a slow decline. Ultimately, sadly, by the 1800s, the Ottoman Empire is going to be referred to by historians, you don't need to write this down, we'll get it later in the year, as the sick man of Europe. They're not doing very well anymore. And by 1922, the Ottoman Empire will cease to exist.
Treaty of Sevres.
Yep, very good. All right. The Safavid Empire. This doesn't even pop up on your standards, but I want you to hear it just so you know it's there. The Safavid Empire was the Ottoman Empire's chief Muslim rival. The Safavid Empire, you guys notice here is the Persian Gulf. The country today, directly to the north of the Persian Gulf, is Iran. Very good. The Safavid Empire was the dominant state in what is historically been known as Persia. But the Safavid Empire also controlled Iraq, what is today Iraq. The Safavid Empire also controlled what is today Azerbaijan and other parts in Central Asia. All right? So the Safavid Empire is going to be the dominant Islamic rival to the Ottomans. And they will battle against each other. We'll talk about this at a later date. They will have conflicts with each other. And nearly constant border conflicts between the Ottoman and the Safavids will kind of weaken them both, right? Now, important to note about the Safavid is they were Muslim, but they're Shiite Muslim, right? So whereas the Ottoman Empire were Sunni Muslims, the Safavids were Shiite Muslims. And we're going to remember that because I'm sure you guys have remembered me mentioning that modern-day Iran today, it's primarily a Shiite nation. Iraq, next door to Iran, is predominantly a Shiite nation. All right? And so you've got this, they're the ancestor, the successors to the former Safavid Empire. The Safavid would have its height from 1501, or its rule, it would exist from 1501 to 1722. So we notice there it's not around for nearly as long as the Ottoman Empire is. Ottoman Empire's got another 200 years on them. But they will be an important rival to the Ottomans during their rule. Good? Good. Safavids. Finally, the third of the Gunpowder Empires.
All we're going to talk about is Safavid?
Yep. It's AP World. But you know what you could do? You could go to college, and you could take some 300 level course or some 400 level course that focuses entirely on the gunpowder empires. And you could spend a month talking about the Safavid. But in AP World, we only get 4 minutes.
Like, it's kind of unfair how he talks so long about the Ottomans.
Since when has the world been about fairness? Nothing is fair. Yes?
So the Gunpowder Empires are the Ottoman, the Safavid,
And the Mughal. The Mughal. We're going to talk about the Mughal now.
The Safavid is not.
No, the Safavid is a gunpowder empire. The Ottoman, Safavid, and now the Mughal. But they're just smaller and they're not around for quite as long. Yeah, it's not fair. This is AP World history. And the Ottoman Empire is important to the story of AP World history from the 1400s. They bring an end to the Byzantine Empire all the way to 1914 when they decide to join Germany to fight in World War I. So they've got a much bigger expanse of time, so they deserve a little bit more time. All right? It is what it is. The Mughals. Mughals are founded in 1526 by a guy named Babur I. 1526. Babur, who is going to consolidate power in northern India and actually conquer what was known as the Delhi Sultanate before. You guys remember hearing about the Delhi Sultanate? When Islam spread into northern India, a new Islamic kingdom or sultanate was founded called the Delhi Sultanate. Well, by the early 1500s, thanks to his harnessing of gunpowder technology, Babur is going to conquer that Delhi Sultanate. He claims to be a descendant of Genghis Khan, which isn't that big of a claim because, there's a good chunk of the planet today that's a descendant of Genghis Khan because Genghis Khan got around. But anyway, Babur is claiming to be a descendant of Genghis Khan. Why? Why do you think it might be a good thing for Babur to say, I'm a descendant of Genghis Khan? Emily? Very good. Saying whether you are or you aren't. It's not like Genghis Khan was not sending Babur Christmas cards, right? And saying, my dear, dear great-great-great-grandson. No, he couldn't prove this lineage at all, like definitively, but he's going to claim it because it's going to give legitimacy, right? It gives that connection to some other great ruler. So Babur is going to consolidate power in northern India, and his dynasty is going to become known as the Mughal, M-U-G-H-L, which certainly sounds a lot like what word? Mongol. Very good. So Mughal is Mongol. He's using that name to connect himself to a great empire of the earlier time. Yes?
Is that different from Mogul?
No. The derivation is going to be the same. Now, nor is it different. Have you guys ever heard of someone like Jay-Z being considered a mogul? Or Donald Trump before he became a politician, Donald Trump, to be a real estate mogul, M-O-G-U-L, like some individual that kind of gains control of an industry, and usually wealth comes along with that, and they tend to be very opulent in their lifestyle. A music mogul like Jay-Z or Beyonce or whatever, might be Jay-Z, and then they merge their empire, right? The word mogul takes its name. The word mogul takes its name from Mughal because the Mughal dynasty's rulers lived a very opulent life. How opulent? Well, they built this. All right, we'll talk about that in a moment. That word has now been adopted for these titans of industry, and it all ultimately goes back to the Mongols. Yes, sir.
War was also mentioned in the book, right?
Yes, he was in your book. Huh?
Genghis Khan as well.
Yes, he is. Yes.
So this is the guy.
This is a guy that's mentioned. Yes. All right. The Mughal dynasty, though, will see its greatest height or its expansion come under another ruler named Akbar. A-K-B-A-R. Akbar would rule from 1556 to 1605. Akbar would rule from 1556 to 1605. And let's take a step back. Let's notice, because these years are mentioned in an instant by me. But that's a 50-year reign, right? That's a long rule for an individual when the United States, for example, talks about a president having a maximum presidency of 8 years, or 10 years if you want to get nitpicky about the Constitution. But
21?
what's that?
What amendment was that? No, not 21. What amendment?
20. I think that's the 25th.
How many years did FDR serve?
12. But anyway, 13. So anyway, Akbar is going to be the guy that, like, if you want to think about the Mughal Empire, the Mughal dynasty, as a brilliant and expansive and forward-thinking dynasty, Akbar's your guy. Akbar said, hey, if we're going to expand from the northern part of India, where there's a lot of Muslims, because that's where the Delhi Sultanate was, into southern India, who are we going to come into contact with?
Hindus.
A lot of Hindus. So we have two choices. We can be brutal and repressive to Hindus, or we can tolerate them and embrace them. Akbar is going to be pretty forward-thinking. Even though Islam before, what does Islam say about those non-believers of Islam? Not necessarily. To some, yeah, convert or die. And charge them taxes if they don't. The people of the book. Do you remember us talking about the people of the book? The dhimmi populations. Those are the Christians and Jews. So Christians and Jews under the early Islamic caliphates, those were a tolerated population. All right? And we're going to see the same thing under the Ottoman Empire's rule, and we'll talk about that later. Christians and Jews would be tolerated. But if you weren't a person of the book, the Bible, then you're in trouble within the expansion of the Islamic Caliphate. But Akbar said, I think he's looking at reality. All right, we could persecute these people, but there's 150 million of them. So that might be tricky for us. So let's embrace. Let's live together. Let's make it okay to be a Hindu in the Mughal dynasty. Let's make it obviously okay to be a Muslim. So Akbar practices or teaches religious toleration within the empire. He actually is going to eliminate the jizya tax. Because what would happen because this is a minority Muslim population ruling a majority of Hindus. And what would those Hindus probably do if they couldn't practice their faith or they had to pay a tax that other citizens didn't have to pay? They might leave, but they'd probably revolt. They'd probably rise up. And Akbar wants to avoid that.
How do you spell jizya again?
Jizya. In addition to that, Akbar is going to take a Hindu wife, merging these populations, and he's going to appoint Hindus to important government positions within the Mughal Empire. So Akbar gets a gold star for being a pretty cool, before his time kind of guy. Way to go, Akbar. But unfortunately, the good times won't last, because if you got an Akbar, you probably got an Aurangzeb.
I didn't get that.
Aurangzeb. I don't have a picture of him. Aurangzeb. I will spell it for you. A-U-R. A-U-R-A-N. Aurangzeb. A-U-R-A-N-G-Z-E-B. Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb would rule the Mughal dynasty in the late 1600s. You don't need to memorize these years at all. But he's after Akbar. Well after Akbar. 1658 to 1707. Aurangzeb will expand the territory of the Mughal dynasty. In fact, all the way to the southern tip of India, almost conquering the entire Indian subcontinent. But for every ounce of coolness that Akbar might have had, so people of modern day can look back and say, Akbar, you got it going. Aurangzeb turned back the time. Aurangzeb reinstituted some persecution of the Hindus in India. He reinstituted the jizya tax. And as we've already mentioned, when the Hindus begin to not be tolerated in India, when they've now got to pay more taxes, we're going to see a rise in internal protests and rebellions against Mughal rule. So Aurangzeb's Mughal dynasty will suffer from attacks and uprisings from Hindu populations, from Sikh populations, S-I-K-H, another religious minority in India that's born during this time. And this will ultimately lead to a weakening of the Mughal dynasty. Now, that's not the only thing that's going to lead to some weakening of the Mughals. You also have, during this time period, in the 1500s, you've got Europeans arriving. Here is that city of Goa. That's where the Portuguese land. Just to the north, the British are going to set up shop in Bombay, present-day Mumbai. And then we already mentioned last week the city of Calcutta, which is going to be founded by the British and their British East India Company. So at the same time that the Mughal dynasty is originally expanding, but certainly at the same time they're beginning to become more harsh and oppressive, you've got the rise of European powers. By the time we get to 1750-ish, we've got the Industrial Revolution beginning in Europe, beginning in Britain, leading to a continued growth of British naval power. And ultimately, it will be the British Empire that will bring a complete end to the Mughal dynasty. We will talk about that in our next era, but please know that that's coming on the horizon. Questions, comments, concerns? Yes?
Okay, so we talked about how is that the same as
You're thinking Alexander? Yeah. Sure. Yeah, like, okay, again, we bring up the word legitimacy, right? What are some good ways to gain some legitimacy with the people you're going to rule? Well, claim you are a descendant of some great ruler from before. That works. What are some other ways we do it? We marry a local. That helps. What are some other ways we've done it in history? What are other ways that a ruler has gained legitimacy? Yes?
Divine right of kings.
Saying the gods, that maybe you are even a god yourself, or the gods want you to rule. Absolutely. What's another entirely modern way to gain legitimacy? It's kind of how we do it. You have the people say you're legitimate. You have the people decide. So yeah, absolutely. Great job. And guys, here's what you have to do on an AP exam. You might have that question about how a ruler consolidates power. And how he earns his legitimacy might be an important thing to think about. All right? Yes, sir.
Just happened to be born in the family.
Or just happen to be the son of the guy that was ruling before. That helps too. All right? Questions, comments? Yes, ma'am.
The Mughals,
Yeah.
did they conquer all, not conquer, but did they have control of all of like present-day India?
Except for like all this blob up on the top. That is the original extent of Babur's kingdom or dynasty. Then we bring in this blob, and this is what is controlled under Akbar. And then Aurangzeb pushes further to the south. All right? They never take over this very southern tip of India.
How are you
Yes.
supposed to get there anyway?
Yes.
I'm a little confused because like the
Mughals.
the Mongols. Like,
Mongols, yes.
Because they're like trading so much on the Silk Road, you think that they would have gunpowder as well. So you think that they would.
The Mongols did. Yeah, they did have gunpowder.
Okay, so why didn't they like rise and like take over like the other empires?
They did. The Mongols took over like
I mean, like
that predates. The Mongols have their high point in the 12 and early 1300s. That's like Pax Mongolica. So the Mongols are at this point. By the time we get into the 1400s, certainly into the 1500s, you've got the Mongols have stretched themselves so thin, and now you've got locals within formerly Mongol-controlled areas that have the same toys that the Mongols once monopolized, and they're ultimately going to rise up. So this is after the Mongols have spread themselves pretty thin. But you probably remember from your Genghis Khan Making of the Modern World, if you are deeper than chapter 2, that the Mongols are going to make an attempt to get into India, right? And what do they realize about getting into India that makes it so tricky?
It's hot.
Oh, it's so hot, and okay, they got mountains to get over, and it marshy and harder for the horses to ride in there. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. So the Mongols try, but they don't conquer themselves. But you better believe that everybody around here knows Genghis Khan and the name Khan, right? And in fact, Khan today is a very popular surname, especially in Pakistan. There you go.